These two boxes of Rallyman are jam-packed with possibilities, and it's my intention to highlight all of the interesting things you can do with them. This is Shakedown. In today's Shakedown, we're going to see if we can learn anything from a spot of virtual spectating. In the early 2000s, coverage of the World Rally Championship was peppered with uses of the Virtual Spectator, a digital recreation of each driver's run through a stage synced up with their competitors so that you could see who gained and lost time and whereabouts all of that happened. We can do similar things in gaming, of course. Ghosts are nothing new and are an immediate indication of whether you are faster or slower than the competition. But how much can you learn when you're in the action, actively chasing down a ghost? You can really only learn something when you zoom out and see the bigger picture. So what can we learn from the skies above a Rallyman stage? We're on stage 2 of Rally 6 today and have 6 R6 cars vying for the top step of the podium. None are NPCs, so each driver will probably have a different strategy, notably the red car, who is the leader. Will they be driving a little more cautiously compared to the others? How will starting order affect the other drivers? Is there a sweet spot to avoid the worst of the mud splatter, or are shortcuts where the superstar drivers shine? We're going to try and find out what actually happened during this rally and what we can learn from it to help us get faster, and to do that we're going to watch Rallyman like you've never seen it before. There are a couple of things to keep in mind while you watch this. Firstly, the animation is generally not linked to where the dice were actually placed, we'll see that later. Instead, the animation is there to look somewhat realistic because the intent is to give you a sense of how fast or slow a car was at a given point on the track, which leads me neatly onto the second point. This is in real time. How long it takes a car to get from the start line to the finish line here is how long it took according to the time cards and any unspent second tokens. So the order the cars crossed the line is the order in which they finished. That makes sense, everyone is synced up of course. Can you work out the reason for the differences in speed then? It shouldn't be too difficult. You know that the higher your ending gear, the less time it takes you to cover the distance, and so the lower the ending gear, the more time it takes. What's the lowest gear you can be in? Gear 0, where it takes a full minute to move from your starting place to where you crashed. Again, how and exactly where a car crashed isn't always obvious in this particular view, but the sense of losing time comes across very clearly. If a car is moving incredibly slowly, it's pretty much a given that they lost control somewhere nearby, and you can then often see them speed up as they get back to finishing turns without crashing. You can see that in this particular stage there are common spaces where cars tend to end their turn, and as you can imagine they're usually before corners or speed restrictions. This bunching is caused by one such space before tile 210, where cars want to stop in either 3rd or 4th in the space before. Sometimes good fortune is pretty obvious to spot. The only car to really zip through the final few corners is the red car, which means everyone else was compromised, either through damage, which isn't shown, or through other cars getting in their way, which also isn't shown, or through mud tokens on the track, which again isn't being shown. I'll admit, a lot isn't being shown here, but it's cool, isn't it? It took me far too long to do, and I wish it could be done at the press of a button, but still. You think that after one crash it's game over, and sometimes it is, but as you can see from the orange car's path, you can't ever rule out a podium, even with a turn 1 crash. It's very easy to feel like a single mistake has cost you any chance of a win, and sometimes that is the reality, but the earlier you go off track, the more turns you've got to try and reclaim that lost time. You never know what can happen to the cars ahead. Losing control is an overlooked art form in Rallyman. If you give up trying to deal with your setback completely, then you're really only playing half of the game. And finally, we can see one of the annoying moments of Rallyman, finishing one space before the finish line and then having to take 9 seconds just to move one more space to finish the stage. It happens to most of the cars here and seems to be an obvious place to try and look for some time should we run the stage again. We've got a bit of time to wait for these final 2 cars to cross the finish line, so I'll ask you how you're doing. How are you doing? Played any games of Rallyman lately? Checked out any variant rules? Have you come up with some of your own, or are you more of a stage builder? That's how I started. Speaking of starts, did you correctly guess which car would win? My money was on the yellow car, but look at it now. What happened there? Why is the blue car so slow through this hairpin? Bad luck? Bad decisions? Bit of both? Fun though this depiction of Rallyman is, we can't learn a whole lot from it until we break it apart into turns and see where the time was actually lost and gained. So let's wait for the blue car to end their run and get stuck into the analysis of this rally. Oh, stopped the space short, look. The times between cars at the end of turn 1 is a massive 58 seconds, which is the most you can get from the default R6 gravel dashboard. The yellow car has gone up through the gears, risked the gear 3 jump in 4th, and then slid up to 6th gear to maximise that time gain. It would be a 10-second turn, but go flat out and you get 8 seconds back, meaning this car has managed to cover nearly a quarter of the stage distance in just 2 seconds. It feels great when you can pull it off, but such a flat-out roll has a 32% chance of generating at least 3 hazards, and that's ignoring 4th gear, which will immediately end the run going over the jump if it rolls a hazard. And on orange tiles, that's already a couple of damage tokens. You can see the problems that not sticking the landing can cause with the green car, who reorders their flat-out roll to lose control going over the jump. Their intent was similar to the yellow car, but to end in a standard space in 5th, a slightly safer roll, but instead of an 8-second turn, the green car has a 53-second turn. They've almost gone the same distance, but it has taken much more time, and they've drawn 2 gear damage tokens while doing so. Crashing isn't the end of the world, but the loss of 2 gears can be costly. They'll still be able to reach 6th gear, but it won't be for a while, and their turns will need a little more planning for them to get there. Getting that path right is the red car, our stage leader. They could have finished in 6th like the yellow car, but with leader dice, the chance to lose control in general on such a route is nearly 43%. Deciding to end in 5th and effectively cover the same distance drops the chances to 32%. And again, both of those numbers will be affected by jumping in 4th gear, but I'm sure we'd all agree that those are the better odds, even if a few seconds have to be sacrificed to get there. A successful flat-out roll sees them finish here after 8 seconds, a very strong start for them. In contrast, we have the orange car, who doesn't manage 9 spaces of movement in 8 seconds, but just 4 spaces of movement in a full minute, losing control in the first corner's shortcut and losing a coast die in the process. They've got to make up at least 58 seconds over the rest of the stage, and without one of their coast dice. It sounds like an uphill battle, but can it be done? In this case, the loss of control wasn't a result of driver error, but a board game arena bug, and so the orange car will have to hope that there are no more lurking out there to spoil future turns. For those of us who prefer to play on the tabletop, while there aren't any bugs to deal with, there may still be rules that are forgotten or misinterpreted that may put you on the back foot. How you find a way to overcome challenges that are beyond your control is what will make you a better driver, so don't think all is lost after one bad turn. Elsewhere, the purple car doesn't want to take as much of a risk as the others and finishes a little further back in 4th after 14 seconds, and the blue car isn't even going to entertain the thought of taking the jump on this turn and finishes before it in 5th gear after 10 seconds. Is this a good idea? Will a safety-first approach serve the blue car well? Unfortunately not, as the very next turn sees them lose control, and unfortunately is the right word, as they only had an 11.7% chance to do so. They could also have rolled gears 5 and 6, but doing so would increase their chances of losing control. So with caution at the forefront of their mind, they choose to stick with 4th gear, and it doesn't pay off. And amongst a load of mud getting thrown onto the corner space are 2 of the blue car's gear dice. We can see that gear damage hasn't hampered the green car too much though. While they can only get up to 4th this turn, they manage to get as far down the stage with their 6 dice as they can, ending here after 1 minute and 7. It sounds like a slow time of course, but if you compare it to the red car, they've both done the same distance. Because the red car, on leader dice remember, has decided to roll their dice one by one, they've not earned any seconds back, and the gap between these 2 cars closes to 39 seconds. It'll still take a lot of effort and a touch of luck for the green car to take the lead, but it's not impossible, and some smart flat-out rolls can make all the difference. The yellow car has decided that a shorter turn with a safer flat-out roll is what they need right now. With an eye on the orange car, who was ahead of them on stage, the yellow car holds off any thoughts of overtaking and instead sets themselves up for the next corner by taking 7 seconds to navigate the rest of this tile. There is just a 1.9% chance to lose control rolling gears 5, 6 and a coast die, but stranger things have happened, and it seems the yellow car has lots of breathing room to maintain their lead, though you can only see it on the time-synced run through the stage. Bookending the yellow car are the orange and purple cars. The orange car finds 6th gear and gets 7 seconds back to finish here after 1 minute and 3, and the purple car has chosen to stick with the middly gears but loses a coast die through the shortcut. They finish just a couple of spaces and a couple of seconds behind the leader, which I think goes to show just how strong a start the red car has had. You might expect the strategies to be reversed, the leader dice instilling a more cautious, slow and steady pace from the red car, but it seems that there are other plans in motion. Remember that 1.9% chance of losing control that the yellow car had on the last turn? Well, a gear 4, a gear 3 and a leader die has 3.7% chance to roll 3 hazards, and that's exactly what the red car has done. They end their turn here 1 minute 25 into the stage. They managed to avoid damage, but you never want to add a minute to your time. But was it really adding a minute? They could have finished in 4th gear for the time, but that would have set them up for a longer route around the next corner, which would impact the hairpin afterwards. And so they wanted to finish here in 3rd gear, which would allow them to brake down to 1st and skip through the inside lanes to speed out the other side on the next turn. This means that they wanted to take 30 seconds to get here, or 27 by going flat out, and so they only lost 30 seconds by losing control. And whether they lost control or not, they're still able to skip down through the inside lanes on their next turn. So was it as bad as it seems? You can make 30 seconds back much easier than you can make a minute back. The more time you have to make up, the more you're almost relying on other drivers to make mistakes and give you a helping hand. In this case, the red car has no damage to worry about, and that will of course have an impact when you're trying to work out how bad a crash was, but of all the crashes we've seen in this rally so far, this is a good crash. So let's see a bad crash. The yellow car slowed to an absolute crawl at this point, and the reason was a loss of control in 5th gear. They've got 5 seconds to offset the minute that the time card will show, but that still means that they too have a lot of time to claw back over the next few turns. Going flat out on a roll with a 21.3% chance of enough hazards to lose control is a risk that I think a lot of people would be willing to take. But that means that around 1 in every 5 attempts to do so will result in failure, and the yellow car becomes another victim to safe probabilities about rolling hazards and draws a gear and coast die damage to add to their woes. They've gone from front runners to fighting for a podium place in no time at all. In contrast, the orange, purple and blue cars maintain their pace, with around 40 seconds separating their times. But, to probably quote the WRC commentators of the early 2000s, what does that look like on stage? After 1 minute of rallying, we know where the orange car was. They're about to exit the first shortcut. The blue car is just about to enter the second shortcut, but the purple car has taken the lead and is halfway through the stage, and they've done so without ever hitting 6th gear. Consistency is king when it comes to Rallyman, it seems, so can the purple car stay on top as it heads into the slower corners? In terms of being out front in distance after 3 turns, the green car leads the way. They've managed to navigate through their broken gearbox to tackle the first slow corner and have gone through the shortcut on the hairpin afterwards. It has cost them 40 seconds with a 2nd gear finish, but 6 seconds back for going flat out sees them finish here after 1 minute and 41. They need to claw back some time to chase down the red car, remember, so again they go flat out in turn 4, which sees them cut through the shortcuts and emerge in 6th gear onto the home straight, and they've covered all that distance in 5 seconds. But the red car has covered even more distance in 10 seconds, also finishing in 6th gear on this space. They've avoided damage, so even though they don't want to risk going flat out with their leader dice, they can still make use of more spaces on each turn compared to cars with damage, and doing so has gotten them through 2, maybe even 3 tricky corners. In fact, if we go back to Virtual Spectator, we can see that the red car was able to do all of this before the green car had even set themselves up for the hairpin, and the leader's win is all but official. Further back, you can see the kinds of spaces players prefer to end their turns in, with the orange, yellow and purple cars all ending their turns here in 3rd gear, seemingly on the same strategy for the upcoming corners, albeit with different levels of damage on their dashboards. Again, there's about 40 seconds separating their times here, the purple car having the advantage. But what about the blue car? A little ahead of these 3 on the previous turn, they continue to be a little ahead on this turn, but with gear damage they've decided that the best thing for them to do is slow down, and it will cost them 46 seconds to split these 2 corners into 2 turns, but it doesn't get much better on turn 5, because a loss of control puts them on the inside of the hairpin, and they're at the 3-minute mark as a result. It's thanks in part to the yellow car having yet another loss of control and spraying mud onto the corner by taking to the shortcut. It's another bad time loss for both cars, and to add insult to injury for the yellow car, their loss of control came while rolling 1 by 1, after hazards on the brake die and gear 1 die to start the turn, a chance of just 5.6%. The yellow car has gone from turns that lasted 10 seconds to turns that take more than 50, and there just isn't enough of the stage left to mount a comeback. How much of that was down to bad luck with loss of control probability and damage pulls? It plays its part, of course, but so does stamping on the brakes before each corner. Perhaps we should be smoother and more consistent like the purple car, but because Rallyman is a game of probability, they too have lost control in the hairpin, stumbling out the other side with gear and coast die damage. After their reliable start, they finally come undone 2 minutes and 4 seconds into their run. A couple of spaces up the road, however, is the orange car. It's not hard to forget how far behind they were at the start of this stage, but 2 minutes in and it is they who are in 3rd place and heading onto the back straight, thanks to getting through these corners safely and efficiently, having decided to roll 1 by 1 to make sure of a good finish to their turn. The back straight has just two features to deal with, a speed limit and a jump, and the red car has managed to tackle both of them this turn, obeying the speed limit and taking the jump in 5th with a coast die. Had they gone flat out, they may well have managed to get past that jump without incident, but they've decided to not take the risk and end up paying 1 second to secure a die, ending in 6th gear 1 space before the finish line. It is the only die that is paid for with a second token by any car in this rally. It's a little annoying to finish just short of the line, and it happens to a few cars in this stage, but it's not the end of the world to take 9 seconds to move 1 space. It's not the greatest return on investment, so to speak, when you know it's possible to move at least 8 spaces in 2 seconds, but that comes with a fair amount of risk, and this most certainly doesn't. But if crashing over the line is the plan for you, be sure to check if there's an assistance tile to repair the damage afterwards. And do remember that crashing over the line is an option for you. You are timed in your final gear, and then you crash and take damage. Rallyman is about knowing how to crash as much as it is about knowing how to avoid crashing. Also avoiding a crash this turn is the green car in what looks to be a bit of a distant second place, but even with the damage they have taken, they will be able to cross the finish line on their next turn instead of having to stop in front of it. And so the result of their final flat-out roll is a stage time of 1 minute 58, just 3 seconds behind the leader. Remember back on turn 2 when they had both covered the same distance? There were 39 seconds between them at that point. A loss of control for the red car right after that closed the gap to 16 seconds, and from there, the time gained comes from the green car going flat out and the red car on their leader dice rolling 1 by 1. Where might the green car have gained enough time to finish ahead of the leader? And if it's just not possible to find any more time, we must surely conclude that taking 2 gear damage tokens was their undoing. But any other combination of damage tokens changes their entire approach to the rally, so we may never know for sure what might have been. From here, everyone's turns are largely identical. Nobody crashes, so it's all a case of getting as far down the back straight as they can each turn, and the more damage you have, the harder that is, resulting in shorter turns that finish in front of the jump or in front of the finish line. But taking more turns doesn't necessarily mean taking longer. The yellow car finishes the stage after 9 turns compared to the 8 that the blue car needed, but deciding to end in first gear in the middle of the stage has cost the blue car 5th place. They weren't to know that they would crash on the next turn, of course, but the 20 seconds they gave up at this point of the stage are the 20 seconds they needed to finish ahead of the yellow car by the slimmest of margins, a single second. To wrap up the results then, the red car, our lead car, finished in 1 minute 55, just ahead of the green car in 1 minute 58. Further back, but still making the podium, is the orange car in 2:16, followed by the purple car in 2:28. The yellow car crosses the line in 5th after 3 minutes and 8, and the blue car finishes in 3 minutes 27, and we've all got something to learn. Hopefully we can all take something different away from this, but what is that something? Are you the kind of player who insists on rolling flat out when they really ought not to? I know I am, so in future maybe I need to take into consideration the chances of failure on any given roll. Whether you have the flat-out probability tables to hand, or have memorised some ballpark figures to give you an idea, knowing how risky a turn is might make you think about how else you can make it through that corner or past that obstacle. And in thinking of alternative approaches, you might put yourself in a better position down the road. It can be hard to see what a better position is though, so how about this as something to think about? Is it better to move 6 spaces and take a 20-second time card, or is it better to move 3 spaces and take a 10-second time card twice? Break dice do not generate seconds and increase your likelihood of losing control, so if you have to use one to make up the distance, is the end result worth the added risk? What if ending in a lower gear after those 6 spaces is more preferable to continuing to end in a higher gear though? It's harder to answer because every stage and situation you find yourself in is going to be different. We don't rally in a hypothetical scenario. We rally across stages where we find cars in the wrong place at the wrong time, or unexpected mud tokens forcing us to change routes through a corner, or any number of variant rules making it more difficult to drive in general. Somewhere amongst all of that, we have to decide what is best for us in that moment based on limited or perhaps non-existent information about what the other cars are doing relative to us. In the original Rallyman rules, you can make use of an optional rule regarding split times so that all players can see the current time taken for each car as it passes a certain point on stage, and perhaps change your strategies accordingly. While it might lead to longer turns as players start to crunch the numbers to maximise their chances of catching up to a faster car, it can be useful to show new players that Rallyman Dirt is a timed game, and that the decisions you make along the way each have their own impacts on your overall time. Learning from your mistakes can be beneficial, but it isn't the best way to learn how to be quicker. In my opinion, the best way to learn how to be quicker is to learn from players who are better than you and work out why they made the choices they did. Let's go back to the first turn of this stage for one example. In this game, I was in the yellow car. I had that fantastic start, but I got there by placing down gears 1 and 2, coasting through the corner and then taking the jump in 4th. Contrast that with the green car, who decided to go through the shortcut in 4th before coasting over the jump. Yes, they risk losing a coast die through the shortcut, but more importantly, a coast die is half as many hazards on it than a gear 4 die, so their chances of a successful jump are twice as good. And when such a jump might end your turn in an instant, you probably want it to be a success. That the green car crashed and my yellow car didn't is somewhat irrelevant. The dice could have rolled anything for either player, but next time out, I should consider this kind of dice placement to maximise my chances of a successful turn. It's little things like that that can matter the most, and once you start to look out for safer ways to place and roll your dice, you'll start seeing new ways to tackle tricky situations out on stage. There's definitely more nuance to Rallyman than go fast and don't crash, but I encourage you to start there, get comfortable with failing to do so, and then come back stronger having learned something new. Now, if I could just work out how to drift around this corner.